Hello, today we'll be finishing the second part on the unit on personality and leisure. We ended last class with just discussing these general personality traits that are studied in leisure research. And we're going to go through again each of these personality traits, defining it, talking about, maybe what it is to be high or low on this, and then how it impacts leisure behavior. And again, for examination, this is really what you need to understand in this unit is just, what is the trait and how is that going to impact someone's leisure behaviors and leisure choices because of being strong on that personality trait. So first is locus of control, and we have already talked about this when we spoke about learned helplessness. It's really about locus of control is, how do you view as being controlling behaviors yourself, or is it, from the outside factors? So people differ then in how important control and freedom are in their lives. People can have internal or external locus of control. So if someone has internal locus of control, it means that they can control the outcomes. Whereas external locus of control often believe in luck, the environment, or others controlling the outcomes, and we talked about this, we talked about learned helplessness, but for example, let's just use taking an exam in class. If you have high internal locus of control, you are going to believe no matter how much you study, like the more you study, the better your grade is going to be, that you have control over the outcomes. Whereas you also might have a bit of external locus where you think, well, it doesn't matter how much I try because the instructor just provides unreasonable exams. Or maybe you believe in luck and maybe you think you did poor on an exam because you forgot to wear your lucky socks. And there's nothing wrong with it. I think I have high internal locus of control, but for example, I wear this one pair of jeans to every single exam, and I mean for 13 years of university. So I still have those lucky bands. So locus of control and leisure then, its influence. So, well, if someone is high locus of control, internal locus of control, that means they have more freedom of choice and control. And we know then that if you have that freedom, sense of freedom and control and choice are essential to the experience of leisure. So people with a high locus, in greater internal locus of control are more likely to experience leisure. And people with greater internal locus of control are also then more likely to have higher levels of flow or optimal experiences. Again, it's related to being able to, like, the freedom and choice and sense of control. Those are the foundations for experiencing flow-like activities. So there's individual differences and then how much control and freedom people feel in their lives, and that can modify their leisure choices then and leisure experiences. And obviously, for example, people with an external locus of control might be less likely to, try new things, for example. Next is attentional style. So that is, it's about how people differ in how they process information from the physical and social environment. So it's basically what it says. How much attention do you pay to the environment? And people with who basically can the more likely you are to be able to tune out, and I put that in quotations, sources of stimulation in the world around you. Those people have experienced greater levels of flow, for example, because in order to experience flow, there's this attentional style and ability to focus on the activity one is doing to the point of, losing yourself, losing sense of time. So the more you're able to tune out information, the more likely you can maybe engage in flow. And, lots of people, this can be like a socially learned personality trait, but, I was thinking of, I was an only child until I was 12 or 13. So obviously I had lots of opportunities in my household. Like, as an only child, you got to focus and concentrate, and it was quiet. So I had that until my sister was born. But in contrast, my husband, as one of 9 kids, the youngest, he had, the opposite experience as me, where there was always things going around. And I do notice this as differences amongst us. So, for example, I would never have a real leisure experience or flow-like experience if I could hear music or people talking or all this. I have a hard time tuning out the environment or tuning out distractions, especially social distractions. Whereas my husband can kind of like shut out the world and is able to just like, tune out all that information, and then perhaps maybe have a greater experience, especially when there's distractions. Next is type A behavior profile. I'm sure you've heard of type A and, type B. There's even research now on a type C personality trait. And I'm not sure, we often kind of put type A and type B as opposites, but I'm not exactly sure about that. But we can definitely look at type A anyway. So type A people are usually hyper aggressive. And I would say I'm a typical type A personality. It's about achievement striving, time urgency, making sure like you get there on time, you're organized. You may have therefore impatience with others, and also multitask, which can be positive, but can also be negative in that you're, for example, more likely to get into flow if you're focusing on a single task. Where type B people, they don't feel challenged or threatened by like other people's expectations. They go with the natural rhythms of life. They're more patient, focus on a single task, one thing at a time. And, I would say, as I said, I'm type A. My husband, is probably more of a type B individual, kind of goes with the flow of things, and focuses on, as I said, one thing at a time. So people who are type A tendencies, they can, because they want this hyper aggressive, and it's about personal development and urgency and all that, they have less involvement in relaxing activities. Myself, as an example, it takes me a very long time to relax. When I'm on vacation, I notice that for the first 2 or 3 days of being off work, I actually mostly do stuff that's work-like, like cleaning the house and doing big projects and all this. It's like I don't know what to do with myself almost. So, and it might take up to 2 or 3 days in order for me to fully relax and just kind of like enjoy and don't feel like I gotta be productive. So for me, that means that, for example, a 3-day long weekend doesn't feel that relaxing or vacationy like me, because I need a little bit more time before I can relax. Type A people often are more competitive, very competitive in games. Maybe can be sore losers too, and have no preference over work and leisure. And I kind of alluded to this, but they often are seeking work-like experiences in their leisure. So, you know, um, training for a triathlon, volunteering, all these sorts of things that are much more work-like. Whereas a type B personality is going to be much more spontaneous in their leisure, and it's just again more about the natural rhythms of life. Playfulness has also been viewed as a personality trait. So this is the cognitive, physical, and social spontaneity, really. So being spontaneous in all ways. Often people high on playfulness have a sense of humor and manifest joy, meaning joy just kind of spills out of them, really. So their influence on leisure is people with greater playfulness often are very intellectually curious, so really like learning and have humor. For example, they might really like puns and smart humor, for example. um uh Being like physical spontaneity can cause restlessness. So for example, they often people high on playfulness like are very fidgety if they're not doing things physical. So, for example, in the classroom right now, I would normally be looking around the room and I might see people like fidgeting their legs a lot. And anyway, those are people I would identify as having restlessness, meaning they probably have greater playfulness and the need to be doing things physical. They're often very spontaneous and highly creative. Generally, they're a fun friend. Then we have autotelic personality. And autotelic personalities is very, very much related to flow and optimal experiences. So autotelic means that you're more participating for the purpose of an activity lies in the activity itself, meaning that it is some activities are just rewarding enough themselves to need no other justification or external reward. So it's very intrinsically motivated. So, in a way, you can think of this personality trait as someone who is just generally more intrinsically motivated to do things. And because of that, people who have autotelic personalities then usually are able to get into flow more. So they find these activities that provide the appropriate level of challenge and that matches their skills, allowing them to experience flow. And so they're really then finding intrinsic interest and enjoyment in almost all activities. So, I think, for example, my husband, I would say, has a fairly strong autotelic personality. He can sort of make things fun. And I would say I think I'm like this too. But as an example, he's always liked, mowing the lawn is actually not something that he enjoys. Never has. But probably as a childhood experience, his parents had 30 acres, and as a child, he had, as a teenager, he had to mow the lawn, push mower for 2 acres of it, took like the weekend. So, but now I've noticed that as an adult, what he does is he makes challenges for himself in order to make it enjoyable. So he does patterns when he mows the lawn. So sometimes he tries like, that beautiful stripe pattern like you see on golf courses and stuff. Or for a while, he was doing circular ones and to see like how many, circles he could get around. So the point is, he's like kind of creating tricks and challenging things in order to make that to be flow like, even though it's just mowing the lawn. So, as I've said, people with autotelic personalities can create leisure-like experiences in unleisure-like circumstances. So, um, it can take work-like activities and, you make them fun. So, and and it's often, in childhood, it's nice to meet these people because you kind of, um, for example, I've always tried to make like household chores to be fun for my kids so that they think that they're more leisure than work. It also means that people are going to be less bored or and have less anxiety. Um, so, for example, someone who, some people would just, if they, I don't know if any of you have ever had to wait in an airport for hours and hours, like your flight is delayed or canceled. Um, Now, some people might find that terribly bored. Myself, I've always viewed that as like, I just, it's an opportunity to meet people or read my book or crochet. I usually really enjoy talking to other people and, maybe meeting, you're kind of talking to people from all over the world or just people watching is fun. So again, if you can make um, work like things or kind of boring environments to be leisure like, it's more like you have an autotelic personality. And obviously that relates to then there's greater ability to create optimal levels of challenge and skill. People with autotelic personalities are able to find that sweet spot and thus able more to have flow. And the last personality disposition here that's important that we look at in leisure research is shyness. And this might be this is, as I said, shyness is different from um, being an introvert. Okay, I think we get those personality traits mixed up. So shyness is when it's like just self-consciousness in social situations. And obviously, and I would say shyness is obviously also can change in different situations. As I mentioned, I might think a student is very shy at school, but then I see them as a lifeguard or, teaching swimming lessons. And, they seem, just very confident and outgoing to me. So often, we might exhibit shyness in different situations. But obviously, people who have are very strong on shyness might have lower perceived freedom and control. And obviously, they might have difficulty experiencing and finding satisfaction in leisure, especially if it's, highly social situations. Um, Now, generally, I think obviously most people who are very high with shyness might not gravitate to all social situations, but it's very important when you're working in leisure settings that if that you help facilitate people who may are feeling shy to feel comfortable in these social situations. You're not letting someone be standing at the wall by themselves. You're bringing them into the group or at least making them feel comfortable. But it's also important that you let someone, I think it's sometimes you want to bring someone into the group so much, but we also have to respect shyness and allow people, if they want to participate, not exactly in that big social group, that's okay too. So there are some leisure-specific personality dispositions. So these are kind of personality traits that have been invented. I shouldn't say invented, but developed. The concept is developed by a leisure researcher. So we're going to look at these four, and they're kind of repetitive. They're related a lot to the ones we've already talked about. Some of them. So there's leisure boredom. Self is entertainment capacity. intrinsic leisure motivation, personality disposition, very long word, and perceived freedom in leisure. So first is leisure boredom, and this is the tendency to be bored in one's leisure or free time, probably related to not autotelic. And we actually have a leisure boredom scale that was developed, and you're actually going to be completing that for one of your reflection activities, which I'll talk about in a moment. But so some people in their free time are just generally can become bored. So people who have a high tendency of leisure boredom then have they often don't perceive themselves as being socially competent, meaning like feel like they lack social skills to be able to comfortably enter social situations. They're less likely to entertain themselves, you know. I don't know. I was thinking of like the two kids. Like I remember when I was a kid, and I might have a friend over, and I'd be like, "What would you like to do?" And they'd say, "I don't know. What do you want to do?" And you go back and forth. I mean, I personally was never like that as a child, and I found it hard to be friends with people who were high on leisure boredom because I always could find, you know, something to do. Often they might have less positive attitudes towards leisure, and often a smaller leisure repertoire. So, meaning like they don't have as many things in their toolbox, so it's more easily to be bored. Personally, I think that leisure boredom is increasing in our society. And I think it's a lot to do with that people are so accustomed now, especially, you know, the generation just below and your generation from me, have everything's been so structured. You know, you go to this activity, you do this, this, and this, then you go to your next activity. It's all told when you have to have leisure. So, and whereas a child who has less structure like that, they are more able to create leisure for themselves and not get bored as easily. So I personally think that we're not really teaching children very well, like how to have, you know, how to come up with leisure themselves. This is related then to self-entertainment capacity. So self-entertainment capacity was developed by one of the textbook authors, my mentor Mandel, in the 80s. And he was looking at then the personality trait as the capacity or ability to fill your free time with mental, physical, or social activities. That's personally satisfying. So it's really, can you entertain yourself? So again, it's related to boredom and autotelic personality as well. But people then who are high on self as entertainment capacity don't get bored as easily. They don't view leisure as a waste of time. And as I already alluded to, they're more likely to have autotelic personalities. That's meaning they're more able to find leisure in work-like settings. They're able to match skills and challenge better, and also just generally have a stronger need, like have perceived freedom and control. In contrast, people who are low on self as entertainment capacity are very easily bored. They might view time as heavy on their hands or too much free time or like feeling nothing to do. And you know, you can often see this with people who have retired, because there's sometimes people have a terrible time with retirement, and that might be because of this too. But it's, you know, and they might instead, you know, go and get another job, a part-time job, because they'd rather be working because they find this leisure time to be straining on them. Third is intrinsic leisure motivation, personality disposition. Again, this is fairly related too. So this trait is like the tendency to experience leisure as intrinsically motivating, so that you're participating for your own reasons, intrinsic within yourself, rather than these external rewards. And for example, we have the intrinsic leisure motivation scale, which you have already completed as one of your reflections. So the influence on leisures, well, people who have a high intrinsic motivation as a personality obviously have a strong desire for self-determination, for competence. They also want a deep involvement and challenge. So, and obviously this is all very much, you can see these are related, and it's very related to the ability to get into flow or to have optimal leisure experiences. And related to the other ones, then they're less likely to experience boredom. So you can see a kind of leisure boredom, self-entertainment capacity, and this intrinsic leisure motivation, personality disposition are related to each other. And this then relates to the last one, which is perceived freedom and leisure. So this persona trait is the extent to which people generally feel their leisure is freely chosen. It's really then about sense of control. So people then who have greater perceived freedom obviously are more likely to have positive leisure experiences, because that's a fundamental characteristic of leisure. More likely to get more of the benefits or positive outcomes out of leisure, and will generally have a more positive attitude towards leisure. Whereas someone who has lower levels of perceived freedom is probably going to have a less positive view of free time and leisure, and maybe more focuses on work. So for one of your reflection activities, you're going to be completing the leisure boredom scale. It's at the end of the instructions. It was developed by Azuhola and Weisinger. Here's a clip from it. You'll rate these items from 1 to 5 according to the extent that you agree with them. So 1 is strongly disagree, and 5 is strongly agree. Pardon me. You will notice that some of the items indicate high leisure boredom. For example, for me, leisure time just drags on and on, while others indicate low leisure boredom, meaning during my leisure time, I become highly involved in what I do. So this means that you have to reverse score the items that indicate low leisure boredom. And I have a table below that explains this. So for on that survey, items 2, 4, 7, 8, 9, 12, 13, 16, you've got to flip the score. So that means, like, if you gave a 1, you're going to make it a 5. If you first put a 2, you'd make that a 4, etc. And again, this is all in the instructions as well for the assignment. Here it is. Here I have this table, so you can see how you should score, whether it's normal score or you have to reverse score it. And once you finished your first completing it, and then look at your scoring, reverse score, then you add up your scores, and your scores will range from 16 to 80. And the lower the score, the less boredom that you're experiencing. The higher the score, the greater the leisure boredom. So following this, you'll write a paragraph looking at, do you experience leisure boredom according to your score? Do you agree with these results? What could affect your high or low tendency of leisure boredom? Like things like your attitude towards leisure, or the size of your leisure repertoire, or maybe do you entertain yourself easily? As a recreation practitioner, what would you do to assist someone who is experiencing high leisure boredom? For example, increase their repertoire or try to teach them to be more spontaneous or that sort of thing. Provide them with more opportunities for choice. And it says here, notice here, no, you do not need to submit your completed scale. Like, I don't need to see the survey. I just report your score. And finally, for examination on this chapter, make sure that you understand the focus and limitations of the 4 perspectives on personality theory. So, like, there was limitations when it came to psychodynamic and cognitive social specifically. We also discuss which of these theories is most commonly used to study personality in leisure research. And the answer to that is trait theory. Make sure you can identify where personality traits come from. For example, like, is it genetic or the environment? Be able to define and, identify these big 5 personality traits and how they influence leisure. Remember, the acronym is OCEAN for the big 5. And then when it comes to general personality traits studied in the field of leisure, again, be able to just generally understand these to be able to identify them. So, for example, in a multiple choice, I might give you a scenario or specific trait, and then you would have to say which of these personality traits that scenario is exhibiting. And similarly, with the leisure-specific personality disposition. So understanding leisure boredom, self as entertainment, intrinsic leisure motivation, and the perceived freedom in leisure. So you should be able to identify all these traits and their influence on leisure. And finally, there's lots of terms here. So all the personality traits are really a term, a definition that provide, looking at what the trait is. So that is it then for personality and leisure. I hope you have sort of a greater understanding of how your personality might influence your leisure, but also how it's important kind of understand people's personalities when we are helping to facilitate positive leisure experiences for them, or to understand how to provide a good physical education opportunity for a child or older adults, or how to provide leisure counseling and suggestions, or which therapeutic recreation activities would be best for an individual.